To be clear, if we have people, we can put somebody into a pre-diabetic state by keeping them awake for 24 hours. It really
Wow.
doesn't take very much. Like the data is hyper consistent on this. Like if you stay up and you're not getting quality sleep, I can almost assuredly put you into a pre-diabetic state.
Welcome back to Longevity Roadmap, everyone. This is Buck Joffrey, and today's show should be of great interest to everybody because it involves something that we all do, and that is sleep. Dr. Michael Breus, he's the sleep doctor, and this is a fascinating conversation. I learned a lot, actually. You've heard me talk about sleep before, I'm sure. We go through a lot of the same, structural sleep issues, talking about deep sleep, deep non-REM sleep and REM sleep. But he also adds a bunch of very practical nuggets in there as well. And it's something that I think you will find very entertaining as well as educational. Hope you enjoy it. We'll have that interview right after these messages.
Hey, longevity enthusiasts, it's time to take it to the next level. I've been fine-tuning my longevity regimen for years, and I look better and feel better than I did a decade ago. In fact, my blood work is even better than it was back then. And it's all because of my data-driven regimen, and it's inspired me to create a course and community just for you. It's called the Longevity Roadmap, and I urge you to check it out. If you're tired of your belly fat, tired of being tired, or just want to optimize yourself for the next 50 years, visit longevityroadmap.com. That's longevityroadmap.com.
Welcome back to the show, everyone. Today, my guest on Longevity Roadmap is Dr. Michael Breus, widely known as the sleep doctor. He's a clinical psychologist and one of the only of a handful of people in the world to hold both a PhD in clinical psychology and a board certification in sleep medicine. Over the last 2 decades, Dr. Breus has helped everyone from elite athletes and celebrities to everyday people optimize their sleep for better health, performance, and longevity. He's the author of several best-selling books, including The Power of When, The Sleep Doctor's Diet Plan, and he's been a regular guest on national platforms like Dr. Oz Show, Oprah, CNN. But today, we're going to go a little bit deeper than your average talk show segment, and we'll explore how poor sleep accelerates aging at the cellular level and a whole bunch of other stuff. So, Michael, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Buck. I'm excited to be here. I'm excited to talk to everybody about how to live longer, healthier, and hopefully happier.
Yeah, great. Well, okay, let's start with that whole concept of sleep and longevity. So now you've said that sleep is the third pillar of health alongside diet and exercise, but could be just as well. It could be number one, right? I mean, what kind of data do we have that suggests the importance of sleep in longevity?
So there's a decent amount of data when we start to kind of like think through this as sort of an overall longevity kind of play. Like, number one, what is longevity and how do we think about it is certainly something that people have a tendency to want to look at. But generally speaking, what we're seeing here is without sleep, almost nothing works, right? So let's talk about sleep and diet as an example. A lot of people think, well, if I eat appropriately and I eat good food for me, then I should live longer. I should have more nutrients in my system, right? I should have more vitamins, more minerals. All that should be good for me, right? Here's what's interesting is if you don't sleep, almost none of it matters. Let me explain. So if you become sleep deprived, and let's, for your audience, let's break down what a definition of sleep deprivation is because it's different for everyone, right? So most people, when they think about sleep deprivation, they only think about minutes or hours. Like, am I getting my 6 hours, my 7 hours, my 8 hours? That is only one part of the definition for sleep deprivation. There's a second part. You can get 8 hours, but if it's poor quality, you might as well have gotten 4. Right? So there is a bi-directional relationship here between quantity and quality and everything else in your body working well. So you want to get both high quantity and high quality sleep. Now, if I had to push one or the other and say, which would I rather you get? It's quality every time. If you get 5.5 to 6 hours of high quality sleep versus 8 hours of crappy sleep, no way. That's definitely not what we want to do. So let's say that you've identified, hey, I think I'm sleep deprived. By the way, a couple of quick, easy ways to identify that you're sleep deprived. Here's one. Do you fall asleep in under 5 minutes? Now, most people would say, well, that's probably pretty good, right, Michael? Absolutely not. So sleep is not an on-off switch. It's more like slowly pulling your foot off the gas and slowly putting your foot on the brake. There's about a 15 to 18-minute process that should occur while you're falling asleep. If you're having a conversation with your bed partner and you fall asleep in the middle of your conversation, I can assure you, you are sleep deprived.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. If you fall asleep as your head hits the pillow, I can assure you, you are sleep deprived, right? Another easy one to identify, do you hit the snooze button, right? So first of all, snooze button was the single worst invention for all of sleep ever. Average snooze button is between 7 and 9 minutes long, and your body physiologically can't get back into those deep stages of sleep. So you have to kind of basically start again. So when you hit the snooze button, all you're doing is giving yourself light, crappy sleep as many times as you snooze. So if you snooze or if you fall asleep really quickly, there's a very high likelihood that you're sleep deprived. And let's be fair, when you wake up in the morning and you feel like crap, guess what? You're sleep deprived, okay? So once we recognize some level of sleep deprivation, here's what goes on from a nutrition standpoint only, okay? Several different things. Number one, your metabolism slows down. Why? Well, your brain is saying, I don't know why I'm still awake, but I better slow down on my resource consumption because I'm going to run out of resource. I'm going to run out of fuel, right? So it slows down your metabolism. The second thing it does is it increases your appetite, right? Why? To forage and get more food, right? So your brain is starting to say to itself, hey, I'm not supposed to be awake right now, so I better go get some resources and I better conserve the resources that I have. So we have high appetite and we have low metabolism. That isn't great, number one, for not gaining weight, okay? But there's more. Then we have a hormonal shift. So these two hormones, one called leptin, the other called ghrelin, go cuckoo when you're sleep deprived. Ghrelin increases, which is the go hormone, which increases hunger. By the way, hunger and appetite are two completely different things in the brain. And then leptin is the satiety hormone, or the hormone that tells you that you're feeling full. So you have 15% less leptin, 20% more ghrelin. So just to back up for all of our listeners, you have high appetite, you have high hunger, you have low metabolism, and you have low feelings of being full. If that is not a recipe for disaster, I don't know what is. But wait, it gets worse, because when you're awake for long periods of time, cortisol increases. And when cortisol is wandering around your brain for extended periods of time, your brain doesn't like it. So your brain says, I want the cortisol to slow down. What's the easiest way to do that? Produce serotonin. What's the easiest way to produce serotonin? Eat a muffin, eat a Snickers, right? Eat a high fat, high carbohydrate, high sugar food, because it will produce the serotonin and the dopamine, clicks in, and now all of a sudden you're feeling better. But guess what? Sleep deprived people have a tendency to snack more and on higher fat, non-healthy foods. So when we're starting to look at this picture, as you get sleep deprived, literally every diet buck on the side of it should say, results will vary based on sleep deprivation.
Yeah. That was a good introduction, I guess, to the problem. The one last piece I just thought might be useful for our audience is sleep deprivation and insulin resistance, right? Because
100%.
Obviously you've got, not only are you craving all of these foods, but your metabolic, you've got metabolic dysfunction. So you are, making it worse for your body to actually process all of this garbage you're eating as well, right?
Absolutely. So not only are you craving bad food, but your body isn't reacting well. And so when we talk about insulin and insulin resistance, to be clear, if we have people, we can put somebody into a pre-diabetic state by keeping them awake for 24 hours. It really doesn't take very much. Like, the data is hyper consistent on this. Like, if you stay up and you're not getting quality sleep, I can almost assuredly put you into a pre-diabetic state. So for people out there with diabetes, right, sleep is a big friggin' deal, right? Not only are you watching your nutrition, not only are you watching your sugar intake, understanding how that works, but if you're not sleeping well as a diabetic, you can easily throw your diabetes into a very chaotic state, which is very difficult to manage.
One other question I have, I guess we've talked about sort of the obvious, some of the clinical manifestations here, but what kind of changes at the molecular level do you see? For example, connections with some of the hallmarks of aging.
Sure. So there is some data looking at telomere length. which is one of the biomarkers and things that people, for folks out there who may or may not, have you guys ever discussed telomeres on
Oh, yeah.
the show?
Yeah.
Okay. So everybody out here probably knows what telomeres are, but these are kind of the end cap on the chromosome that kind of determines how long that you're going to live. And basically, and one of the things that we've discovered is when you're well slept, the shrinkage that goes along with telomeres slows down.
Right.
So
Right.
that becomes highly important on that side of things for sure. Also, I think we could easily say that sleep helps with inflammation. And inflammation is kind of the buzzword of the century at this point.
Inflammaging, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so when you're not well slept, your entire body reacts poorly to this, causing increases in things like interleukin 1 and things like C-reactive protein, which are all inflammation markers that then will have a cascading effects to other systems inside of the body. So, I mean, here's the bottom line. Everything you do, you do better with a good night's sleep. It affects every organ system in every disease state.
Of course. Okay, well, let's talk a little bit about maybe sleep architecture, because I think it's probably useful to have some
let's give people
context of that. I mean, we don't need to obviously go through everything, but there's a couple elements of the sleep cycle that are particularly important and maybe a useful thing to go over.
Absolutely. So what I'd love to do is give your audience a little bit of a maybe like a biology lesson from high school real quick, just to remind folks. But there's also some new interesting things that we've understood. And so when you're looking at sleep, what are you looking at? Why are you looking at it? What does it do? Those kind of things become, I think, relative to when you're asking yourself, hey, why do I want to get good sleep? So first of all, there are stages of sleep. And so we've broken sleep down into what's called REM and non-REM. Non-REM is broken up into 3 distinct stages. It used to be 4, and we've collapsed them to 3. And so it's stages 1, stages 2, and stage 3, right? And so when we look at these stages, if I'm being honest, stage 1 is very transitory. There's really not a whole lot to it. It basically brings you, it kind of opens the door for sleep. Stage 2 makes up the preponderance of sleep. Roughly over 50% of your night is made up from stage 2. Stage 2 does some interesting things, but if I'm being really honest, stage 2 kind of sets your brain up to do the things that it needs to do in stage 3 and 4 and in REM sleep. So I'm going to focus on stage 3 and 4 and on REM for our audience today, because I think that's where they're going to see a lot of value just in terms of learning new things that we've discovered in science. So stage 3, 4, also called deep sleep or delta sleep. All of those terms are synonymous, guys and gals out there. I just want you to understand that is your wake up and feel great sleep. This is your physical restoration. This is kind of like pulling the car into the body shop and getting the dents and the dinks and the scratches pulled out every single night. This is true cellular repair. This is where we see the largest bolus of growth hormone emitted. And so that's where all of this is coming from. And so we don't want to do anything to mess up deep sleep because of growth hormone coming in and helping us repair the entire body. Now, there's a second thing that happens during stage 3, 4 sleep that's a fairly recent discovery. To be clear, it's been going on since the dawn of time, but only recently have scientists been able to discover something called the glymphatic system. So the glymphatic system, I call it the waste management system of the brain. It's kind of like the garbage truck that comes in every single night and it scoops out all of these proteins that get created during the daytime. Now, you might be wondering, well, why do I have proteins being created during the daytime? Turns out when we're thinking, when we're acting, when our brain is using electrical signals to tell the brain to then tell the body different things to do and systems to turn on and turn off. When it does that, it produces a residual protein in the brain. When these residual proteins accumulate, they become very problematic. The proteins I'm talking about are beta amyloid and tau. And when these accumulate, they have a tendency to wrap around the nerves. That's called Alzheimer's disease. None of us like this. And so, to be clear, the best stage of sleep that helps you get rid of Alzheimer's disease is stage 3, 4, or deep sleep or delta sleep, right?
Along that line, before we get into anything else, just a anecdote or two on that. There's also a little bit of a brain contraction at that point, and the deep non-REM that facilitates this ability for the glymphatic fluid to wander on in. So which I think is really interesting. I think about when we talk about this is some of the famous figures historically in a recent history. If you talk about Ronald Reagan or Margaret Thatcher, who were notably people who did not sleep very much, and they used to brag about it. And both of them ended up with Alzheimer's disease ultimately.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's interesting. Here's what I can tell you is I don't think anybody's bragging anymore about lack of sleep. Like, I think everybody's kind of jumped on that train and been like, you know what? This wasn't such a great idea. Unfortunately, our bodies have a tendency to tell us, you're fine, keep going, you can push through, things like that. But, the Mother Nature's a bitch is what I like to say. And, she shows up at the middle of the night and she will make sure that you get some sleep. And if you don't, there assuredly consequences. Now, I want to be very, very clear, though, because there's a lot of people who might be listening to this who will say, well, hold on. If that's the case, Dr. Breus, I'm going to go out and get an Aura ring or a Whoop strap, and I'm going to track my deep sleep and make sure that I get as much deep sleep as I possibly can. And I want to learn everything I can, every supplement and every exercise I can to increase my deep sleep. That is usually a very common reaction to what we're discussing. And I want people to stop and pause for a second. So number one, almost no tracker that's out there is completely accurate. I want to be very, very clear about it. I use the Aura ring on myself and on my patients because it's relative. I don't look at the absolute number. So a lot of people will come up to me and they'll say, hey, Dr. Breus, my Aura ring says I only got 14 minutes of deep sleep. Well, I don't care. Okay. Did you get 14 minutes the night before? Yeah. How about 14 the night before? Yeah. So then it's being consistently inaccurate. So I don't care if it says 14. I care if it goes from a reasonably consistent number to a very out of range number. So if it goes from 14 to 307, I want to know what happened that night. Okay?
Right.
That's what you can use trackers for, because to be fair, trackers are not yet at the point of being highly, highly accurate. We're not too far away. I would argue in the next 2 years with AI and machine learning and things like that, I think trackers will get better and better and better. Arguably the best tracker / medical device on the market is a ring. It's called a Happy Ring. It's a new device that came out on the market about 9 months ago, and it's full nighttime polysomnography in a ring, which has never been done before. FDA approved medical, right?
So is that ring? Would you think it's probably more accurate than an Aura ring then? A Happy ring?
100. There's no question.
Then why
There's
not
no
get a
question.
Happy ring? Why don't you have a Happy ring on, Dr. Breus?
I have a Happy Ring right here.
Okay.
So here's I have a Happy Ring right here, and then I have my Aura as well. And so I'm comparing and contrasting both of them. And what I've discovered is, here's the thing, is you don't need a full nighttime polysomnography study on you every single night. It's just unnecessary. Whereas it would be good to get sleep tested in order to see if you have sleep apnea or something like that. And we'll talk about that maybe a little bit later.
Before we go to that, I want to finish the important parts of the cycle. And I think the next thing probably to get into is probably the REM side of things, right?
Well, there it is, but I want to also take a pause and I want to give people a few ideas about how to increase stage 3-4 sleep, and then things that decrease stage 3-4 sleep, because this is really where the rubber meets the road for everyone out there in terms of lifestyle and behavior. So unfortunately, alcohol is
I knew
the
you were going
main
to say
offender. I know, brother, is the main offender for this. But here's what we're learning is, if alcohol is going to be on board, the further away it is from lights out, the better, right? So I'm advocating for day drinking is what I'm telling you, okay? I'm advocating for day drinking.
Just move it to a Bloody Mary and
a mimosa in the day, and you're in good shape, right? Exactly. Now, here's what's funny about that, right? Is not only is it true, but I don't know if you've ever noticed this. Like, I'm not a big alcohol drinker, but we would drink during the daytime, for example, for Mother's Day, right? Or for, fathers to go out for brunch, have a mimosa, Bloody Mary, something like that. And here's what you'll discover is it takes about a third as much alcohol for you to get tipsy than it would when you normally drink, because your liver at that time of day is not producing alcohol dehydrogenase, which is the thing that actually metabolizes alcohol.
Is that right?
It's pretty. So I'm not convinced. Well, so first of all, alcohol dehydrogenase turns on between 4 and 6 p.m. In your body.
So we're like evolutionarily wired to start drinking at happy hour.
You got it, brother. So here's what's fascinating.
That is great.
Here's how the story goes is I don't think every bartender in the world figured out, oh,
Yeah.
alcohol dehydrogenase doesn't seem to come out until 4. But what they did notice was there's a time of day where they could feed salty or spicy food to their patrons and they could consume more alcohol. Because earlier in the day, if they gave them more than 2 drinks, they were, slammed. But at this particular time of day, they're like, oh, this works better. And so that's one of the reasons why happy hour has distributed itself so well, right? So you can, in fact, drink only during happy hour. So let's say from 4 to 6, still drink not as much as you want, but you can drink a decent amount and not have it have a tremendous effect on deep sleep. There's a second one that's not as prevalent on deep sleep, more on REM sleep, and that's caffeine, right? And so, I'm hitting all the good ones, right? But to be fair, caffeine is definitely a morning beverage. The further away from lights out that you can drink caffeine, the better. It really has a bigger effect on REM sleep than it does on stage 3-4 sleep, but it assuredly affects stage 3-4 sleep, and caffeine makes it hard for you to fall asleep, depending upon how much you've ingested and how close to bedtime you've ingested. Remember, folks, caffeine is a stimulant. Now, people have different caffeine sensitivities. So there's some people who say, I can drink a cup of espresso and go right to bed, and they might be right. However, the quality of the sleep that they're getting is probably awful, right? So I want to be very, very clear. I don't have a problem with you drinking alcohol, and I don't have a problem with you drinking caffeine, but do it earlier in the daytime or limit the amount so that it does not have as large an effect on your sleep. And you should be having days where you're caffeine free or you're alcohol free anyway, because quite frankly, it's a lot healthier to do that. Okay, let's get into REM sleep.
Well,
got a
before you
question?
do that, just one real quick thing. You mentioned the caffeine. I think it's an interesting physiology there. If you want to give sort of the quick 101 on adenosine, the relationship between caffeine and adenosine, because I think it's just interesting, if nothing else.
Absolutely. So when a cell eats a piece of glucose, something comes out the back end. One of those things is called adenosine. Adenosine works its way through your system and then gets to a very specific receptor area in your brain. As adenosine accumulates, you get sleepier and sleepier and sleepier. Here's the weird thing. If you look at the molecular structure of adenosine and you look at the molecular structure of caffeine, they're off by 1 molecule, which is kind of crazy when you think like this thing that's inside my head is 1 molecule different from this thing that's grown in the forest, right? But it is. And here's where you can actually leverage that in a positive way for yourself. So I created this thing that I call a Napa latte. Okay. So here's what you do. Let's say it's before 2 p.m. and you are dragging. You only got 5.5 hours of sleep the night before. You got a big presentation. Your boss is on your case. Something's going on and you've got to be alert. What do? Go and get a cup of drip black coffee. Throw in 3 ice cubes merely to cool it down. Slug it. Drink the whole thing as quickly as you possibly can and then immediately close your eyes and take a 25-minute nap. You don't even have to fall asleep, but your body will burn through the adenosine. The caffeine is literally waiting in the wings because it's so close in size. It clicks in and blocks that adenosine receptor. You're good for 4 hours, guaranteed every single time.
So it's basically acting as like a competitive inhibitor of
exactly.
And what's the half-life on the caffeine? Just for timing purposes, to understand.
Yep. So somewhere between 6 and 8 hours, depending upon how fast a metabolizer you are. So as an example, I'm 57 years old. I'm going to be a bit of a slower metabolizer than my 23-year-old son, who can drill through a Red Bull and be able to fall asleep at night. And if I had a Red Bull past noon, I would be up until 4 o'clock in the morning, right? So as we age, our ability to metabolize caffeine can change over time, and it can get a bit slower. But generally speaking, caffeine has a half-life between 6 and 8 hours. So don't do a Napa latte past 2 p.m., especially if you're going to bed around 10 or 11. That'll give you at least enough time to get half of the caffeine out of your system.
Okay, let's talk REM sleep.
REM sleep, one of my favorites. It's a very cool stage. A lot of interesting things go on during REM sleep, but I want to be very, very clear. REM sleep is your mental restoration. So stage 3 is your physical restoration. REM sleep is your mental restoration. And this is where we have a tendency to move information from our short-term memory to our long-term memory. So kind of creating like an organizational substructure in your head, kind of like a filing cabinet. So people get data coming in through their eyes, through their ears, through their nose, and through their mouth, some of which they want to retain, some of which they want to get rid of. REM sleep is the place where it kind of parses a lot of that out and decides, okay, here's the group of data that we want to keep. That process of kind of solidifying it in our brains, creating habits and memories, have a tendency to occur during REM sleep. Now, here's what's also interesting is REM sleep has a tendency to be where most of our creative dreams are coming from. And by the way, dreams are one of the hallmarks of REM sleep. But I want to also let everybody know you can dream in any stage of sleep. It is not just REM. If we wake somebody up in REM, 80% of the time, they're going to tell us that they're dreaming. But if we wake somebody up in stage 3 sleep and we ask them if they were dreaming, about 45 to 50% of the time, they will say that they are. So when we start to look at those dreams versus REM dreams, it turns out that they are qualitatively different. So a non-REM dream tends to be more procedural. Riding a bike, cooking a meal, using a microwave, those kind of things get solidified. But when you are creative, like you're writing a story or a blog or you're creating content or whatever it is you're doing, those dreams have a tendency to be more on the REM side of things. Also, dreams are what I call emotional metabolism. So what is the other function of REM besides this memorial content of moving information from short-term memory to long-term memory? It's processing emotions. So one of the things that we know is if you cannot process an emotion while sleeping, you wake up. It's called a nightmare, right? So if you have a situation going on, a movie inside your head called a dream, and it's going and you're processing it, and then you get to this point where you become fearful, you can't process this any longer, and you wake up in a burst and wonder what the heck is going on, that is officially called a nightmare. So we know that emotional processing or emotional metabolism appears to occur during REM sleep as well. Now, there is also a very interesting thing that happens in REM sleep, and it's called REM sleep atonia, or this paralysis that occurs during REM sleep. Now, people always wonder, well, why would we need to be paralyzed? Well, it's in order to not act out our dreams.
Yeah,
now,
I was going to ask you specifically about that, Michael, because that's what I had always assumed the paralysis of REM sleep was for that purpose. But if you're saying that if you dream and not in non-REM stages as well, what's keeping us from, jumping out the window and all that?
So it has to do with that content and that creative versus procedural, right? So we have a tendency to be more ballistic, more illustrative. Our arms move around, our bodies move around much more during a REM, could move around much more during REM sleep because of the creative content versus the non-REM sleep. So sleepwalking, sleep talking tends to occur in stages 3 and 4 at the beginning of the night. Something called REM sleep behavior disorder, where people are acting out their dreams, has a tendency to occur in the latter part of the night. So I've had patients with REM sleep behavior disorder. So number one, it's rare. So a lot of people think they've got it, and what they actually have is sleepwalking or sleep talking. It's not officially REM sleep behavior disorder. I'll tell you one of the patients I had, give you a quick patient story that I think you'll find interesting. So I'm originally from a small area outside Atlanta, Georgia called Sandy Springs, Georgia. And I practiced right in that area in actually Decatur, Georgia. And I had a friend come in who was a hunter. Right. And if you're a hunter and you shoot a deer and you don't kill it, you either need to slit its throat or crack its neck. It's the most humane thing to do. So he woke up with his wife's head ready to crack her neck. No shit. Ready to crack her neck. Right. So the first question I get asked is, did he kill her? Good news. He did not kill anyone. No lives have been spared for me to tell you this story.
Yes.
The second question that I always get asked, are they still married? She is a very patient woman, and we were able to find a medication that silenced the behavior. So historically, with sleepwalking, sleep talking, and REM behavior disorder, we tend to use a medication called clonopin, clonazepam, which is basically an old school benzodiazepine. We use it at a very small dose, about 0.5 milligram, and it seems to silence the behavior quite nicely. However, the important lesson to be learned here is that in 35% of people with REM behavior disorder, they actually have a precursor for Parkinson's syndrome. And so that's very serious very quickly, right? And so we have to be thoughtful when we see these behaviors. And the reason I bring up the story is not to be sad, but to tell people sleep is a window into your health.
Yeah.
If you are not sleeping well, there's something else going wrong 9 times out of 10. And so it's really worthwhile if you feel as though your sleep is not where it should be in terms of quality or quantity. It's definitely worthwhile either getting yourself tested, talking with your doctor, looking for potential solutions to be able to improve said sleep, right? So now I want to talk a little bit about REM sleep and some of the things that affect REM sleep, and then ways to promote and ways to take away. By the way, the easiest way to promote deep sleep, that stage 3 sleep that we were talking about, that physical restorative sleep, is to wake up at the same time 7 days a week. I'll explain that in just a second. So when we're looking, actually, I'll explain it now. So when we look at waking up at the same time, why do we want to wake up at the same time every single day? It actually has to do with biology. So what ends up happening is when we wake up in the morning and our eyes open up, sunlight hits our eye, and we have a special cell in our eye, several of them, called a melanopsin cell. Melanopsin cell then sends the signal from blue light back to the back of our brain and turns off the melatonin faucet in our head. However, it sets a timer for approximately 14 hours later, okay? So this is why it's so important to wake up at the same time every day. So if you're waking up at 6 a.m., 14 hours later, which is the melatonin phase response curve, is 8 p.m. Melatonin kicks back into gear. It's up and in by 9:30. You start to get a little sleepy. You're in bed by 10. And now you've got a very consistent circadian rhythm and a very consistent stage production. So to be clear, the time you wake up directly affects the time when melatonin is produced inside your noggin every single day. So if you are waking up at 6 during the week and 8 on the weekends, what ends up happening is melatonin shifts on the weekends, and that's why Mondays suck, right? So if all you do from this entire discussion is just wake up at the same time 7 days a week, I can assure you you'll get somewhere between a 20 and 30% improvement in overall sleep quality, specifically in your deep sleep.
But obviously, doesn't it depend a little bit on what time you also go to sleep? I mean, so for me, what's interesting is that I always seem to my body wants to wake up at the same time, no matter what. Doesn't matter what time I go to bed, right? Sometimes I'm like, okay, great, I could stay up another hour.
What time is it? What time is that?
Well, it's about 7 o'clock
in the morning.
AM. Yeah,
perfect.
7 a.m.
What's
is
wrong
about
with that?
Nothing wrong with it. I just need to get myself to make sure that I can probably start falling asleep around 10:30 if I try. But a lot of times
you probably don't need to. I would argue that's too much sleep. You're looking at 8.5 hours at that point, right? So here's what I'll tell you is when you regularize your wake up time, it creates a self-limiting step for your bedtime. Let me explain. If you know you're waking up every single day without fail at 6 a.m., you are not going out till 2 o'clock in the morning and having a rager. I can assure you, okay? You'll do it one time and you'll feel like such crap. You'll never do it again. I feel like bedtimes are kind of like a bag of cookies, right? As soon as it's open, it's game over. Like as soon as you pass, like if you say to yourself, hey, I'm going to bed at 10:30 and it's past 10:30, it's like, woohoo, let's go. Let's watch Game of Thrones. Let's do something, crazy. And you're off into oblivion. If you know, hey, an alarm is coming at 6 a.m., whether I like it or not, it will absolutely positively curb your behavior.
Let's talk about chronotypes, because part of the issue out there is like there's some, people say, well, gosh, I'm a late person. I'm an early morning person. And tell us what the reality is there, like about chronotypes. How do people differ from one person to another, and how are they separated?
Sure. So this is my arguably biggest area of expertise. I wrote my most popular book is called The Power of When, W-H-E-N, and it talks all about these things called chronotypes. For folks out there who have not heard of the word chronotype before, you actually already know about the concept. If any of you have ever been called an early bird or a night owl, or you know somebody that has, those are chronotypes. Now, historically, there have always been at least 3. There's early birds, there's night owls, there's people in the middle, right? And let's be fair, that's been going on since the dawn of time, right? If you think about it, going back to hunter-gatherer days, right? Who were the hunters? Well, they were the early birds. They got up before dawn, they killed, they brought, food back to the village. Who were the people in the middle? Well, those were the villagers. They took care of the village, they raised the children, they built the huts, they did all that stuff. And then who were the night owls? Well, they were the security probably, right? They're up anyway, give them a spear, let them stand there, right? So all of that is very, very straightforward. People have been talking about this since the 70s in terms of how to identify early birds versus night owls. My big contribution is I found a fourth chronotype. Now, I want to be very clear. These are genetic. You don't get to choose.
Yeah.
I can look on your 23andMe or your Ancestry.com or your human genome. I look in a very particular area. I want to be clear. There's about 55 different areas where you can look at these chronotypes in different ways. But the main area is called the PER3 area. And what we see is the building blocks. If they flip one way, you're an early bird. If they flip another way, you're a night owl. If they stay constant, you're in the middle. But there is an irregular flipping that can occur. And I call those people dolphins. So to be clear, I'm not a bird, I'm a mammal. So I renamed the system and I gave it animal names. And I wanted to give it animals that actually perform these chronotypes. So early birds become lions because who wouldn't want to be the king or queen of the jungle, right? People in the middle are bears. Evening people are wolves. And then people with this irregular sleep pattern, mostly insomniacs, I call them dolphins. Now, the reason people always wonder, why did you choose dolphins? So dolphins sleep unihemispherically. So half of their brain is asleep while the other half is awake and looking for predators. I felt like that kind of explains my insomniacs. And so I created a quiz. You can go online to chronoquiz.com and we'll put that in the show notes. And then you can figure out what your chronotype is. Now, you might be saying, well, Michael, that's all well and good. I mean, it sounds like kind of a fun party trick, but how does that help me in any way, shape, or form? Like, what good does that do? Here's where the unlock really happens. Once you know what your chronotype is, you can actually, with a high degree of predictive validity, know exactly what your hormone profile is in a 24-hour cycle. So you know when cortisol is naturally high, you know when testosterone is high, when estrogen is high, you know when it's actually low, you know when melatonin is high. It's very, very predictable. It just starts at different points. So for early birds, it starts at like 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning. But for night owls, it might not start until 7:30, 8 o'clock in the morning. But once you know what that pattern is, you can plan activities when your body is naturally already in that state. So as an example, let's look at exercise, right? So there are people out there who like to exercise every single day. I can actually show them, based on their chronotype, the time of day where they will actually perform their best. As you would imagine, it would be a little bit earlier because they're early birds, right? Versus a night owl. So as an example, if you're a night owl and you're in high school and your coach has you come at 6:30 in the morning to do track and field and do a run, you're miserable, right? And by the way, you probably perform better at track and field events in the evening time because that's when your chronotype is alive and well. So you can really start to understand different things. We gathered over 220 studies in the book, and we can now tell people the perfect time of day to have sex, eat a cheeseburger, ask your boss for a raise, go to bed, work out, write a novel. It's actually quite amazing, all the different things that people
And you can do that with a questionnaire, not just with the genetic testing.
I can do it better with genetic testing, but I would say I do it at about an 85 to 90% accuracy rate with questionnaire. We've had almost 3 million people take the quiz, so we've been able to modify it and get it drilled in nice.
The other question I think that comes from this is, like, when you think about chronotypes, and I think about, again, myself and also my kids, and
they change.
They change, right? I would have said when I was like a teenager that I would have definitely was a late chronotype. I was probably,
all
right?
Teenagers are late chronotypes. So what you're talking about is this, exactly.
Dynamic,
what you're talking about here is this idea that I call chrono-longevity. So everybody goes through every chronotype, right? So when you're an itty bitty baby, you're a lion. You go to bed early. You wake up early because that's what itty bitty babies do. Then once you're about 2 years old till about 6 or 7, maybe 8 years old, you're a bear. You're in the middle, right? You like to go to bed around 7:30. You like to wake up around 7:30. Everything seems to be pretty good. Then adolescence hits. I don't know anybody out there, but if you've got teenagers, I had 2 of them. They want to go to bed at 2 a.m. and sleep until 2 o'clock the next day. So they are wolves. Then they get to about 20, 25, and then a chronotype sets in. That will stay for about 30 years. And then it will change again. So I'll give you an instance where you might realize something like this, Buck. So as an example, I don't know if your parents are still alive, but if I call up my parents and I say, hey, let's go to dinner tonight, my dad will say, 5 o'clock dinner. Sounds like a plan, right? And I'm like,
Yeah.
Dad, nobody eats at 5 o'clock. But his chronotype is going backwards. So
Yeah.
as we age, our chronotype has a tendency to get earlier. So what you've identified is this force that seems to come in and out of our lives in sort of different ways, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, and you know what's tricky about that, I find, and you know, with kids, you wonder. I've been dragging my 16-year-old. She's like so exhausted every morning, and I'm like, this is
Yeah,
not normal
it's
for her.
brutal.
She should be starting in about an hour later at least.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
I mean, it doesn't seem like the school should be paying attention to that a little bit in terms of
So they
performance.
have, but
Yeah.
they're choosing to ignore it. So as an
Yeah.
example, at the University of Minneapolis, they have done significant studies looking at school start times. And as an example, what they did was they had every kid who was in high school start 1 hour later than every other kid. And what they discovered was in first period, every single child increased by a full letter grade. So if
Was
they
that
were a
right?
B student, they became an A student. If they were a D student, they became a C student merely by showing up an hour later because of their chronotype. So you're on to something, but bus schedules are difficult and there's a lot of reasons why different things go different ways.
Talk about naps here, and
Sure.
if you would, I've become a napper, and my kids make fun of me for that now.
So how old are you? Do you mind me asking?
Yeah, I'm 51.
51. Okay, so I'm 57, right?
Uh-huh.
And so the question becomes, as we get older, why do we like naps more?
Yeah,
Also,
fair.
to be clear, my favorite time to nap is watching golf, right?
Yeah.
Rory steps up to the tee box. Like they're always whispering, like it's always so nice and quiet. It's perfect,
Yeah,
right? You
yeah.
can just fall asleep, wake up, and there may be 6 holes in. You really haven't missed that much. They're going to show you the highlights anyway. So golf and napping seem to go hand in hand. But I'll tell you what doesn't go hand in hand, which is insomnia and napping. So if you have a hard time falling asleep or staying asleep, you should not nap. Period. Full stop. Drop the mic. Here's why. There are two systems in your brain that make you sleep. One is called sleep drive. The other is called sleep rhythm. We talked about sleep drive and rhythm, actually, when we were talking about adenosine, right? And we talked about rhythm when we were talking about chronotypes, right? And so what ends up happening is if you nap too late in the day, you lower your adenosine. And so you don't have enough sleep drive to put you to sleep. And if you've already got insomnia where you can't fall asleep or you can't stay asleep, it just makes it a nightmare. So if you're an insomniac, I say no, no, no to the nap. But if you're a normal person and you want to fall asleep for 20 or 30 minutes on the couch while you're watching golf on Sunday afternoon, I don't think I care.
Yeah. Yeah. So what are your thoughts on some of the sleep supplements out there? I'm specifically when I think about magnesium threonate, glycine, L-theanine, low dose, even melatonin.
Yeah, let's
like
talk
that.
about them.
Yeah.
So I feel very strongly that the universe of supplementation is full of snake oil and bullshit.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. And so here's what I'd say to every single one of my patients is I said, number one, let's do blood work. Let's see what this unit, meaning your body, is deficient in first. If you are deficient in vitamin D, if you are deficient in iron, if you are deficient in melatonin, if you are deficient in magnesium, right? We need to fix your deficiencies first and then see how this unit works before we start adding supplement after supplement after supplement, okay? I can assure you there is no one who is listening who has a deficiency in ashwagandha, okay? I can assure you,
Right.
okay?
Right.
And so I would argue, dude, like 75% of the time when I fix the deficiencies first, everything kicks into gear. We do a little bit of behavioral modification where we give people some sleep scheduling. We get them on the right supplements in terms of deficiencies, and they're in great shape. So what do I look for in terms of that? It's simple. I look for iron, I look for magnesium, I look for vitamin D, and I look for melatonin if we can get melatonin tested. But the first three, I would argue, are the biggies, right? So what types? Why do we do them? What are we thinking here? So as far as vitamin D is concerned, you can take almost any type of vitamin D, but you really want D3. That appears to be the one that has the most good for you. Also, many people don't know this. It is a circadian pacemaker. So vitamin D is helpful for your circadian rhythm, and it really should be taken in the morning. A lot of people don't know that, but if you take your vitamin D at night, it can kind of throw off your circadian rhythms. So if you are a morning supplement taker, vitamin D3 is what you want. So dosage wise, depends upon how old you are. Believe it or not, as we get older, we don't need as much vitamin D. So something like 800 to 1,000 international units might be fine for somebody who's 55 plus. But for most people, you're looking at around 2,000 to 3,000 international units, or IU, of vitamin D3 is what you're going to want to be taking. Now, magnesium is different. So there's 13 different types of magnesium out there, okay? And that's very confusing to not only sleep doctors, but consumers as well. So there's two different thoughts here that I want to give people. Is number one, there are at least two branded magnesium products that have done clinical trials, full-on double-blind placebo-controlled trials. One is called Magteen. By the way, I have nothing to do with either one of these companies. The
Which
other
is basically magnesium 3 and 8.
That's correct.
So,
And then another one is called Upgraded Formulas with an S, magnesium. And that turns out to be magnesium chloride, of all things. And that one actually increases deep sleep, does a whole host of different things. Yeah, so I'll tell you the story. It was kind of funny. So I'm at a conference, and this guy who owns the company stands up and says, I want to let everybody know in here, I've got the best magnesium supplement in the world, and it helps with sleep better than anything else. And then he sits back down. So I walk over to him and I said, hey, why don't you put your money where your mouth is? Let's do a clinical trial and see if that's real, because I know for a fact you don't have any clinical data. And you know what he did? He handed me a check for 75 grand, and I did a clinical trial. And guess what? He was correct. His magnesium works better than any magnesium I have ever
Which
seen.
one was that? What was it called?
Upgraded formulas. No relationship to Bulletproof or Dave Asprey or Upgraded Labs, but Upgraded Formulas magnesium. Full-on clinical trial published in a peer-reviewed journal. And by the way, I'm the guy that ran the trial. So I know those two work ridiculously well. Let's talk about melatonin for half a second. Oh, I'm sorry.
Sure. No, I was just going to say with Magteen, you didn't see the same kind of result.
With Magteen, what we saw was we definitely saw an improvement in sleep. But if I'm being honest with you, I didn't run the study, so I don't remember all of the characteristics for it. But if people go to PubMed and you type in Magteen, you'll find it pretty quick.
Okay.
And you'll be able to get the data if you're looking for it. Let's talk for just a half a second about melatonin, because I think that is probably the most misunderstood supplement that's in the sleep supplement universe. So first of all, many people don't know this, but melatonin is a hormone. Okay. It is not a root. It is not an herb. It is not a supplement. It is not it's not a vitamin. It's not a mineral. It is a hormone. And so you don't walk down to the local CVS and buy testosterone or estrogen. And there's a damn good reason, because hormones affect 300 different things in your body, and you need to be thoughtful and careful when you're using them. Thing number two that most people don't know, at high dosages, melatonin is a contraceptive. Yes, you heard me say that right. Melatonin is birth control at high dosages. I can't think of anything worse for a young female developing body under age 18. There are pediatricians all over the world telling parents to give their kids melatonin. And I think it's the worst idea I've ever heard.
Yeah, there's some animal studies out there that show actual gonad shrinkage and like testicular shrinkage.
That's correct.
So not a very
have read your literature.
Good idea.
So that is also clearly that's problematic. Number three problem with melatonin, which nobody knows, melatonin affects 4 different drug classes and changes the effectiveness of those drugs. The first one is birth control. That's problematic. The second one is every SSRI on the planet. So those are, for folks who don't know, those are drugs for depression and anxiety. So by the way, a very large portion of people take those medications, and they have no idea that when they go to the store and buy their melatonin, that it could be having a major effect on it. The other 2 classes of drugs are for blood pressure and for diabetes. Again, this is a circadian pacemaker, so it makes intuitive sense that it's going to change the effectiveness of other drugs in your system. Okay, so let's talk about dosage. So the correct dose, believe it or not, is somewhere between 0.5 and 1.5 milligrams to get melatonin to plasma concentration levels for it to cause the reaction of sleep to begin. Okay.
Most of them come like no less than 5 milligrams.
That is correct. 3, 5, 10 milligrams. So if you get a melatonin gummy, you need to cut it in half. I will tell you, and I have no reference to this company, but I think they do a great job. The only organic melatonin made from seagrass that I have ever discovered is called herbatonin. We can put the website in the show notes for people if they have an interest. And it comes in the right dose of 0.5 milligram to 1.5 milligrams. So if you're looking for melatonin, I would think that would be the best one. Now, the real question is, Michael, when do we use melatonin appropriately? There's really only 4 situations. So jet lag, absolutely.
Jet lag.
Shift work, absolutely. So those 2 are given, and we could do an entire podcast on just both of those if we had the time.
Yeah, right.
The third one is for folks who are getting older who have a melatonin deficiency. So we start to see melatonin deficiencies start around 50, 55. And so it's not uncommon for me to take one of my 55-year-old patients who comes in and says, gosh, the quality of my sleep is bad. I'm waking up multiple times throughout the night. I might stick them on 0.5 milligram of melatonin and see what happens, because I have a conviction that they could have a deficiency. We could run blood work on them. However, you have to be very careful when you're doing blood work for melatonin, because remember, melatonin rises at night and falls during the daytime. So you would have to do blood work or a saliva test where you take saliva in the morning, saliva at night, then the next day, saliva in the morning and saliva at night. You have to label it all. It's a pain in the ass, but you can, in fact, do it. So what I tell people all the time is, if you don't want to go through all the melatonin testing, you can try it, but again, low dose, right? And only use it in those 3 situations. The 4th situation where we have a tendency to see melatonin, which can be helpful, not as much on the sleep side of things, but more on the antioxidant side of things, is with ADD and ADHD. Also, we were talking about REM behavior disorder earlier, and we see that there's a large component where melatonin can be effective there. But to be clear, I rarely put melatonin on board. What I usually put on board for people is vitamin D3, magnesium, and omegas. We know omegas also can be very, very helpful to sleep over time. There's a lot of good evidence that people with high omegas have higher quality sleep. People with low omegas have lower quality sleep. So when I'm looking again at supplementation, I do blood work first. I fix the deficiencies first, and then I hang out and I wait. I let the body react. I see what happens to sleep. They do a sleep diary. Then they may come back to me at that point in time. If they still have symptomatology like difficulty falling asleep, difficulty staying asleep, poor sleep quality, then I might start to look at a few of the different supplements that are out there and see what's appropriate.
So you're a sleep, ultimately the sleep doctor. At what point does a person need to have a home sleep test done?
A great question. I'm glad that you asked. And so here's the thing that I've been noticing is people don't want to do a sleep study. And there's really one reason, because they don't want to get the results of having sleep apnea and then know that they're going to get put on a CPAP machine. So let's talk about that for a half a second here. So number one, not knowing does not mean it's going to go away. Sleep disorders do not spontaneously remit, ever. I've almost never seen it happen. So number one, tests have now become much, much easier. It used to be you'd have to go into a lab. I'd put 27 electrodes on you, be a weird place with cameras on you and belts on your chest. You'd have to try to fall asleep in that environment. Good friggin' luck. Since COVID, everything has changed. We now can send people a study using a ring, not an Oura ring, but like a happy ring or something called a watch pat, which is a wrist-worn device, straight up medical device in your home. Right? So better environment, probably a more representative night of your own sleep than in a lab with 27 electrodes attached to you. And we get better data. So here's the kicker. It's only $200 now. Right. So when you used to do a sleep study, you would spend thousands and thousands of dollars. And by the way, insurance covers all of this. So you might not even have to do it out of pocket, but it's $200 to answer the question right up. And the good news is that, like, as example, websites like mine, like thesleepdoctor.com, if you do /Dr. Mike, you'll walk right into like our little mini clinic and you can learn, hey, do I need a sleep study? Do I not need a sleep study? Number one, it's good to know what's going on. Number two, not everybody ends up on a CPAP machine. I want to be very, very clear about that. And in fact, we are now discovering new and different ways to treat sleep apnea. Now, I want to be very, very clear. CPAP machines work, okay? They work 99% of the time. However, it isn't too much fun going to sleep with a hairdryer blowing up your nose all night long, right? Because
Yeah.
that's what a CPAP feels like. For folks out there who don't know what a CPAP machine is or apnea, let me give a quick definition. Apnea is where your throat collapses onto itself and you stop breathing in your sleep. Generally speaking, we want our patients to breathe. So a CPAP machine is a mask with a hose that's attached to an air compressor. It shoots a thin stream of just air up your nose and to that point of blockage, and then it ever so slightly opens it up, shooting air to your lungs. Once again, this works 99% of the time, but it's very difficult for some people to tolerate. I will let you know this in true form. If I've been prescribing CPAP for people for as long as I can remember working with their doctors, and what we always do is we do something called systematic desensitization first. So we have them wear the mask while they're watching television, as an example, to get used to something on your face. Then we get them to sit there and read a book while the machine is blowing air, again, just to get them used to it. There's nothing fun about getting used to CPAP, but what is fun is avoiding a heart attack. What is fun is waking up in the morning and wanting to play with your grandchildren. What is fun is waking up in the morning and saying to yourself, wow, I got a great night's sleep. I want to go have sex with my partner, right? Like all the things that we do in life are fueled by better sleep. And unfortunately, we're talking about somewhere between 12 and 18% of men have a problem with sleep apnea. That's 1 in 5 people. And with women, the number's a little bit smaller, but once women hit menopause, it's equal to men. So if you're thinking about getting sleep tested, get it. Just get it done. You don't have to act on it. Even if you know, you can still decide, hey, I don't want to use a CPAP machine. So let me tell you about some of the other alternative treatments that are out there that are highly effective. So now dentists, and these are people who are board certified in dental sleep medicine, create these mouth guards that it's an upper and a lower, and the lower pushes your jaw slightly forward, which opens up your posterior airway space. And now you can breathe. And so there's not a mask on your face. It's a mouth guard. There are also surgeries out there to permanently, fix the situation. I'm not the biggest fan of surgery, if I'm being honest, just because once you cut, you really can't go backwards. So I'd rather try to do absolutely everything we can. But look, if somebody's got kissing tonsils and, disrupted adenoids and, inflamed turbinates, it's time to go to the ENT and get that stuff cut out, so you can lead a better life. So I want to be very, very clear that sleep apnea testing does not lead to a CPAP machine if you don't want it to. There are multiple alternatives, but please don't suffer needlessly feeling exhausted every morning, waking up with headaches, having a low libido, being a grouch, not spending time with your friends, doing the things that you enjoy doing because you're too damn tired. Like, let's figure this out, Yeah.
Dr. Michael Breus, he's the sleep doctor. Where can we learn more? I mean, you've given us enormous amounts of information. I know there is a ton more we could talk about, but how can we learn more from what you're doing?
Absolutely. So, I like to send it like it's coming from a fire hose. And so for people who want to learn more, if you go to thesleepdoctor.com/Dr. Mike, you will learn everything you wanted to know. Wander around the website if you'd like, but that's where you can learn more about getting your own home sleep study for, like I said, $200. Also, I have a great YouTube channel that I'd love people to swing by. It's also called The Sleep Doctor. We just hit 200,000 subscribers. And we've been focusing a lot more on looking at seniors, since I'm falling into that category, and looking at senior sleep and things like what vitamins are good, what food is good, what position should you sleep in, things like that. So if you get a chance, swing on over to YouTube or check out the website.
Fantastic. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks, Buck. It was fun.
Thanks for listening. A quick reminder that while I am, in fact, a surgeon, nothing I say should be construed as medical advice. Now, make sure to include your physician in any medical decisions you make. And also, if you're enjoying the show, please make sure to show your support with a like, share, or subscribe.